What kind of sword did Jesus come to bring? There is a Jewish misconception based on the following verse that says, "Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household." Matthew chapter 10, verses 34 to 36. Many misinterpret this verse stating that Jesus had inclinations of violence and hatred because he taught that he didn't come to bring peace but a sword. Firstly, it must be understood that Jesus' first coming wasn't to usher in an age of peace as many Jews expected. He will do that when he returns at the end of age. First, he had to come and deal with sin, make atonement, and bring people into a right relationship with God, to give us the message of his kingdom, so that this message could be spread throughout the world. Jesus is not speaking here about a sort of division through hatred or violence, but the sort of division that inevitably comes between those that want to obey God with those that don't, which occurs even amongst the closest of relatives. God has given people free will to choose whether they will love and serve him. Free will inevitably brings division between those that love and want to obey God with those that don't. Therefore, strife is a fruit of division, even amongst the closest family relatives, because everybody has been given free will and different people have different personalities. Let's say a husband wishes to spend a portion of his money helping less fortunate people, but his selfish wife wishes to use that money for her own selfish gains, like expensive holidays, expensive clothes, jewelry, etc. Isn't this going to bring strife and arguments between the couple? And so it is with the kingdom of God, because the plans of God's kingdom are rooted in selflessness, righteousness, justice, mercy, and love. And these are in sharp contrast to the plans of mankind, which are often rooted in selfishness, unrighteousness, injustice, greed, ambition, and hatred. Therefore, this is the natural division that Jesus was referring to, a division between those that love and want to obey God with those that don't. We even see this division in the Old Testament, and here are a few examples. We see this when God tells Moses to go down the mountain because the people had become corrupt. Having come down from the mountain, he returns to see the Israelites worshipping a golden calf. So he stood at the entrance to the camp and said, "Whoever is for the Lord, come to me." And all the Levites rallied to him. Then he said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Each man strap a sword to his side. Go back and forth through the camp from one end to the other, each killing his brother and friend and neighbor." The Levites did as Moses commanded, and that day about 3,000 of the people died. Exodus chapter 32, verse 26. When the covenant was renewed, Joshua said, "But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord." Joshua chapter 24, verse 15. Again, 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 29 to 33 tell us that the kingdom of Israel became divided because they had forsaken God and not walked in his ways. Now, if Jesus came to bring a sort of division through violence or hatred, it would be evident in his actions and speech. The reality is that we see the opposite is true. Consider these instances. When the soldiers came with the officials from the high priests and Pharisees to arrest Jesus, his disciple Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. Jesus replied to him, "Put your sword back in its place, for all who live by the sword will die by the sword." Matthew chapter 26, verse 52. And then what does he do? He turns around and heals the man's ear. And nowhere do we see Jesus or his followers going around killing anyone. Jesus was put to death by crucifixion, and even when he hung on the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them, they do not know what they are doing." Again, he says, "But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you." Matthew chapter 5, verses 39 to 42. "But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." Matthew chapter 5, verses 44 to 45. One has to examine all sides of somebody's teachings before making an absolute claim from one statement that has been taken out of context. History shows us that the ones who were put to the sword through martyrdom were his followers, because he set the example. He didn't fight back against the Romans, and he didn't call his followers to fight back either. So we see that these are not the words or actions of a violent revolutionary.